People also sometimes start a show with a cold open, a quote from the interview they will later hear on the show. That can be effective. I also am usually an advocate for when people in their intros tell me what the different segments are going to be throughout the show.
Welcome to The Format by Chorus Studios. Technology is always changing, and so is the format, or how we produce and consume media. The Format is a monthly newsletter on Substack and a podcast, where I, Flo of Chorus Studios, talk to you, producers, co-hosts, founders, about the newest and the best practices in podcasting today and tomorrow. From technique to technology, we will explore what new AI tools are podcasters using and why. How to prep for a podcast interview as a host or a guest. Which mics are best for your budget? And even, what happens in your brain when you listen to a podcast? These are all questions I will be asking on The Format. This series will allow me an opportunity to continue learning and growing as a podcast producer and share those learnings with you. So I hope you'll join me on The Format on Substack. Oh boy. You can't see if you're not watching this. I am just doing my thing, drinking my coffee, moving the mic around. And this is take 2. The first take was fine, but I was so nervous. I haven't done this in a while. And to be transparent, which is pretty much the theme of this episode, I feel a lot more comfortable recording myself in conversation with someone than just by myself to the camera. By myself to the camera or to the mic is more nerve-wracking for me because I'm all on my own. I don't have anybody to jump in and fill in the space. But then I have to remember, I get to edit this. I can edit this. I can cut out all the blank spaces, all the mess ups. So why am I nervous? I don't know. There's something about the camera or knowing you're being recorded that just puts you off your center a little bit. So it's always good to practice or do whatever you can to help yourself feel like you're talking to a friend. This episode has been in the cooker for too long. I have been negligent and actually I'll give myself some slack. I've been going through a lot. I have a 8-hour jaw surgery in a week. And that is a lot to plan for, prepare for, make sure everything's organized for while I'm out. It's exciting. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's the reason why I have braces and a little lisp, which I didn't have before I had braces. And also probably why you hear me breathing so hard. My airway is about 1/5 of the size that it should be. So the diagnosis of what I have, in case it's helpful to others out there, is called idiopathic condylar resorption. Idiopathic means they don't know why. Resorption means it's being resorbed back into the body. Condylar means the jaw joint bone. And I'm having my jaw joints replaced. And my surgeon is amazing. He actually had this exact same surgery, like the exact same upper palate surgery and implants. So if anyone can be empathetic in the operating room, it's going to be him. Long story short, I'm really excited about this episode. Arielle is so cool. I just reached out to her on LinkedIn a couple months ago to connect. And then when I was at On Air Fest, I got to meet her. She's been in the industry for many years now. She lives in Brooklyn. A little bit about her background, which we also cover in the episode. She's worked at Descript. She started her own newsletter about podcasting and various podcasts called Earbuds, which I highly recommend you sign up for. In this episode, we'll get to hear a little bit about her story, and then we have a philosophical conversation, surprise, surprise, about this biology of storytelling, how unique we are as a species, and how we can be so impacted by the stories we tell each other biologically. And then we get into some more practical tips for you guys and for me about how to make a podcast trailer. She actually has a podcast about podcast trailers called The Trailer Park. You should check that out. About 20 minutes into the episode, we start breaking down various best practices for podcast intros, outros, the importance of being consistent, and how you can orient your listener or watcher with the way that you format your episode. She also encouraged me to leave some of the producer notes, moments that we had that I would normally edit out, to leave them in the episode. She called it scaffolding. So you can see, like, as a producer and an interviewer, how I sometimes help guide the conversation with questions and comments like that. Then at the very end, there are rapid fire questions that I asked producers, podcast hosts that I met at On Air Fest, some hot button issues in podcasting today. So I hope that this intro has oriented you well. I think you'll enjoy this one and learn something. Please enjoy. We got to meet at On Air Fest, which was awesome. And I didn't realize I overheard you ask Anderson Cooper that question about the value of podcasting, or the impact of having a podcast versus being on the news or on TV. And you mentioned you worked at Descript, which is my number one tool. So
it's great.
I think you're awesome, and you have so much experience in the podcasting industry, from Castbox to Descript to Audily now and Squadcast, to name a few. Tell me a little bit about, like, this is a little bit personal, but, like, what was your dream job growing up, and how do you think that morphed into what you do today? It's a big question.
I remember hearing for the first time, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And feeling existential dread at that, because I had no clue. My dad owns a tuxedo shop that my grandpa founded. My mom works in HR/accounting for different companies. I thought that there was a moment where you must choose what you want to be when you grow up. And you learn, obviously, that that's not a thing. I genuinely was so lost and did not know what I wanted to do. But now I am not lost, and I am doing what I want to be doing. And I think that's what we'll focus on today.
Yeah. Well, were you drawn to anything as a kid, that like storytelling or movies or pop stars?
Not
I want to
even.
be the next Britney. Not even.
No, I was drawn to, I understand the Britney Spears thing. I was shy. I was not interested in, like, dancing or singing or anything like that. I didn't want to be perceived. I actually love being perceived now. But when I was little, I did not want people to look at me or ask me my opinion or anything like that. Now I love giving my opinion. I studied geography. Yeah, I studied geography in undergrad. And I think what led to that is that I loved reading the Guinness Book of World Records. And I was really into, I guess I was attracted to the possibility of going into like international relations or conflict resolution. But that was later on. That was in college. And before that, really was just like, I loved superlatives. I love knowing who has the longest fingernails in the world. And I was like, what can I do with this?
You're just passionate about curiosities in the world.
That's right.
And it sounds maybe a little bit interested in being impactful in the world as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go. I like that retroactive read.
Yeah, because I mean, my undergrad degree was in international relations.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, environmental politics. And I worked on Capitol Hill and in the European
So cool.
Union. And politics is really interesting. It's wild.
It is.
Like
it is.
It's the way that power. I was just fascinated by power and influence and like what is going on, who gets the power and how. And, you know, I have an opinion on things I think matter, and maybe I could influence things.
It's really hard to influence things.
It is. But I've been reading, come on, brain. A book I've been reading.
I read Sapiens in like 2019 and I loved it. And that's right up my alley, but I did not finish it. I haven't finished a book since 2018, she says in whispered tones.
Well, I started it 4 years ago and it's been sitting on my bedside table for about 4 years. And I think maybe the election, I was like, what is happening in the world? What's happened before? Where are we in time and history? And what are we human beings? And I started reading it again and it hit different this time. And now I'm getting through it better.
I'm really into, life, humanity. I'm really into any podcast episode that goes into the history of Neanderthals and how the human race came to be. And I re-listened to those multiple times. There's a podcast called Mobituaries with Mo Rocca, who is a correspondent on CBS Sunday mornings, and he's often on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. He's so funny. He makes me cry of laughter. But anyway, he has this podcast where he eulogizes people, but also concepts and things, and like, for example, bananas. And it's great. But one of the things that he eulogized was the Neanderthals, which he says, I think I grew up thinking it was pronounced Neanderthal, but apparently it can be both because it comes from a valley in Germany that can be pronounced in a number of different ways. Anyway, I love that episode and I highly recommend it if you're interested in that kind of stuff. One of the only books that I finished in the last 10 years is called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. Are you familiar with this?
No, I've not heard of it.
I feel like you would like it. It's sort of like Sapiens in the sense of it talks about distance running as a thing that humans are born and bred to do. That is evolutionarily our only advantage over other species in the past. Now, obviously, we have tools and we have bombs and we have whatever we need to protect ourselves. But in the past, before all of that, humans were able to outrun their prey. And with that, they could, basically chase a buffalo for hundreds of miles over time. And then once the buffalo was tired, kill it and have food. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like Sapiens. This is such a fun tangent.
Because I think I hate running, but
Me too. I try every once in a while though.
When I do it, I do feel better.
Oh, that's great.
It does give me like a little extra, like a sort of endorphin high.
I get that. You're meant to be running. You're born to run.
Well, I'm going to put that somewhere on my mirror.
That you try. Yeah.
I'll get those toesy shoes and go run in the woods.
Do talk about those Vibrams.
Vibrams and run in the woods. I can see it now. I can see myself doing that now. I like the idea of it though. No, but in Sapiens, like we talk about all the other animals in the book. He talks about how all the other animals are like evolutionarily. It's like built into their DNA how they're going to interact, how they're going to procreate. Like bees don't have a culture the way that we do. They just know what to do in the hive with each other. And I'm like, humans, we're out here doing all kinds of different things depending on our
culture. Lots of variations,
Lots of variation. And I think the thing about the Sapiens that I really am starting to appreciate from the scientific angle is the power of stories and religion and money and all the ideas, that the stories around the ideas that we've created, that we've all bought into, that now run our lives.
Right.
And it may seem obvious, but when I hear it put in a biological, evolutionary, scientific way, it's so interesting to think about how different we are than other species because of that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, I know. Language and storytelling is definitely something that sets us apart.
It is
from our peers, and it's what allowed us to develop separately from a lot of other animals that we might be genetically similar to. So
yes. So I think maybe if we were both interested in impact, we ended up here for that reason.
Okay, I love that.
Anyway, what do you think it is about podcasts that really stood out to you or inspired you?
I think for me, I just really love listening as a way of learning. I don't think I was really exposed to that when I was a kid. I think everything was very visual. And because of that, I just wasn't synthesizing information in the way that I can now by way of audio. And I think that I'm driven to help other people get into podcasting, whether it's as a listener or as a creator, because I want more people to be able to experience that. Whether it's because that's the way that they are best at learning or because it's just like fun to detach for a while and go for a walk and listen to a podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that from another friend of mine who I was working on a podcast with who has dyslexia and really has a hard time keeping her focus on a visual book, but loves to learn and just is able to listen to audiobooks and podcasts like ad nauseum, and that's just it just works for her brain better. So
yeah, that's how it is for me, for sure. I opt for it. That's why I haven't finished a book in so long. I've finished audiobooks. I just have a lot of trouble sitting down to read because I find myself, unless I am absolutely locked in on this story, I'm constantly having to go back and read again, and that gets really frustrating. And you can't move while you're doing it, and I love moving.
I think a lot of people are really focused on the video aspect of podcasts right now, and I don't think that's bad. But we should remember that most people still like to listen to podcasts, and there's a reason for that. You can multitask, and it's convenient for people. I'm loving this question around like, what is a podcast?
Me too. And I also think like to an extent, it doesn't matter as long as people are, I always ask people like, do you care where people interact with you or just that they interact with you? And like, whether that's a podcast or your YouTube channel or your Instagram stories or whatever, like, do you care where you're making an impact or just that you're making an impact?
Yeah.
Clip, just kidding.
Clip that. And I mean, for me, the biggest thing is just the fact that it's long form.
Yeah, totally.
I think it should always be audio first. Even any video that tells a story, I need to find this stat somewhere.
I know what you're talking about.
People will lose interest if it doesn't sound good, even if it's beautiful.
It can look okay.
Yeah, if the point is the story, not the visuals. I mean, of course, there's shows that are all about the visuals. And
Right.
it's a fun job, and I feel like right now there's a lot of opportunity in it. So it'll be fun to see what it'll turn into, because I feel like media and tech is always evolving. Podcasting will always be a format, but there's trends in media, so it'll be interesting to see if it changes into something.
Yeah, it's definitely fun to follow.
So tell me a little bit about, how did you first get into podcasting? Like, how long ago was it? What was the first podcast you loved? What was the first podcast job you had?
2014, so 11 years ago, I started listening to podcasts. About 2 years after that, was like, I gotta have a job in this space, whatever that means. But I had no connections. I had no background in it. I had nothing. So I started from zero, which to me was, let me find other people who also like to listen to podcasts and start a newsletter where we talk about those things. My first job, technically, I still do, which is I write a newsletter that shares podcast recommendations. But my first job where somebody was paying me who was not me was I worked for about a year and a half at a co-working space managing a podcast studio that I approached a few months before I started that job, basically being like, podcasts are big, co-working is big, let's get you a podcasting presence here. And they were interested in that. So I built out this studio, even though I was not familiar with how to build out a studio or how to choose soundproofing equipment or sound treatment, how to charge people based on their engineering needs, things like that. I really just worked on the best way to get this all set up. And over time, that allowed me to look for other jobs and make more connections.
That's so cool. I'm really impressed by that. I had to go to graduate school to feel confident enough to do it.
I feel that.
But you just got in there and said, hey, I can figure this out, or I'll learn as I go.
It definitely took...
lady organs.
It definitely did. I really wasn't confident as a learner growing up. I did not feel confident in what I knew until college. And then after that, I definitely still had a lot of imposter syndrome about what I wanted to do and what I would be good at and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely loved podcasts so much that I was like, I got to do whatever it takes to work in this and make my own job.
So you got your studio up and running. You started helping people produce podcasts. You started your newsletter, and you started making money from your newsletter?
Indirectly, yeah. Pretty early on, I was able to ask to advertise in my newsletter for certain events in order to get a free ticket to that event. So in 2017, I went to Podcast Movement by doing that, which was a really cool thing. So I wasn't being paid, but that's the value of a couple $100s. And then, yeah, over time, once more and more people started discovering the newsletter, companies started reaching out, or individual creators started reaching out and asking if they could advertise on the newsletter. So yes, I definitely was able to pay myself that way. It's definitely not a job. It was definitely not making me money, but it was cool to be able to say that my newsletter was monetized.
Yeah, that is super cool. I would love to have sponsors and things like that for the format. But it's also done a really good job of helping me get new clients. Really,
you are indirectly being paid. Yeah.
So you're still releasing earbuds. I am a subscriber. I use Descript a lot, so I don't know if there's any interesting insights having worked there.
Yeah. My newsletter, always just trying to get more people involved, whether it's as a reader or as a curator or whatever. I just want more people to find their next favorite show, and I want that show to be something that maybe they haven't heard of before this week. And there's just so much out there. So the newsletter hopefully exposes you to that. Descript was a really cool experience because I was working at Squadcast when we got acquired by Descript. So I joined Descript by way of Squadcast, the remote recording platform. And I was at Descript for about a year and a half after that and worked with one of my best colleagues ever who is still, and it was a cool experience to be at a startup that a lot of people in the podcast space know and love and have problems with. Sure, I have problems with it too. But ultimately, I love creator tools, and I love to be able to work for creator tools for a while, just to be on the other side of the tools that people that I work with use every day.
Yeah, the breadth of production levels, people producing 100 grand level production podcast, and people like me producing a 5 to 10 grand podcast, we're all using Descript.
Yeah, it's big.
Being used, everybody's been using it, even if it just goes to show it's a really powerful tool for podcasting, because honestly, it's the only reason I started my business.
Wow.
Because when I studied podcasting in grad school, you had to just go into Audition and figure out which waveforms were what words.
So hard.
And I was like, I love podcasts, but this is not doable.
Right.
Like, this is insane. I mean, in terms of just the amount of time
takes a lot longer.
To edit.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, day and night. It's day and night. And I mean, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a podcast producer if Descript didn't exist.
Wow. Yeah. Clip that. They'll love that.
So you enjoyed working there, and you got to know the tools. And then where do you feel like your career has been heading now? In what direction?
I've always been interested in the creative side of things and have myself worked on my own creative projects while working at companies. And when I left Descript, I was definitely thinking about what it would look like to move into something more creative. And this opportunity at Audily presented itself, which is I am the director of community and content at Pinwheel, which is a podcast studio within Audily that focuses on interview shows and chatcasts and things like that. So it's really cool to be on the show development side of things. And then also because the team is small at this point, I'm also on the sales side of things. I'm also doing day-to-day production and anything that might be needed. We can outsource some things, but not everything. So it's really very hands-on and challenging in a cool way.
Sounds like we're doing very similar work right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to get all my own business. I have to manage the clients. I manage everything from start to finish. And it's hard work, but it's so fulfilling, especially if you have a great client. Oh my God, it's so fun.
Yeah.
Do you get involved with like the branding and the show creation phase? I assume you do.
Yes, depending on what they need.
Yep. So in terms of one thing I've been sort of debating with different clients, and I don't think there's a one size fits all solution here, but for introducing, or I call them bumpers or intros and outros for shows. I don't know if it'd be possible to describe some formats for intros and outros that you think work really well, like scripted with music or not, the same every time, different every time.
Well, first of all, dear listener, whoever's listening to this, did you like the way that this show started? I don't know how it's going to start because right now we're only in the middle of the interview. But what would you call your style?
Currently, I usually do a scripted intro and outro with the hosts. Depending on their comfort on camera, it could be just the voiceover with graphics, which is easier to accomplish with a scripted take. than looking at the camera and giving a great read of the script. But I like the idea of having something familiar at the beginning and at the end of each episode to kind of orient the listener, whether they're new or returning, that they're at the right place. This is what the show is about in a brief way. Like, bring them into your world with music and words to sort of orient them into this imagined space that we're going into together.
Yeah, I think that element of things is great. I've seen that be successful. People also sometimes start a show with a cold open, a quote from the interview. They will later hear on the show. That can be effective. You could make a show where you interview me, but then take out all of your questions and sort of just narrate your way through and let me tell the story. In which case, maybe you come in with just a straight up, this is what's happening in this episode. Here's what you're going to get out of it. I think at minimum, it's important to say your name, the name of the show, and then maybe implicitly mention why you brought this guest on or why this is the topic that you chose for this episode, what they're going to get out of this episode that they did not have when they first hit play on it. So thinking about what the takeaways are, I think, are big. I also am usually an advocate for when people in their intros tell me what the different segments are going to be throughout the show. And again, you don't have to spoon feed your listeners. You don't have to explicitly say this. But if, for example, you have a 30-minute interview and then you always have a section at the end where you're doing rapid fire questions that we always ask every guest, maybe you want to mention that up top because that could be really interesting to somebody who doesn't otherwise want to listen to the entire interview. So they might want to skip through. So I think just signposting what you're going to be doing with your interviewee and then letting your listeners know as you hit each of those signposts, hey, we're here now. I think it's cool.
I like that. And people use different audio cues for those transitions as well. And I think one thing I struggle with folks who do video podcasts is they take that for granted, that people listening aren't going to be able to see a graphic transition or something that indicates a new section. We really want to take care of the listener and keep them oriented so they know where they are in our world. We have to, I think it's important to take care of them.
Yeah. Nurturing, onboarding, making an on-ramp that's easy for people to follow, I think is big. That's a huge part of it because ultimately you don't want somebody to tune in thinking that they're going to get one thing and then 20 minutes into the episode, they're not getting that and then they drop off. This happens a lot in live events. And the reason I bring that up is because that's one of the places that you can actually often get feedback. I do a lot of live events and I use platforms that allow you to get that solicit feedback afterwards. And often I've seen feedback that's like, this was cool, but I thought it was going in a different direction. And whether or not that's my fault or their fault for interpreting the title a different way doesn't really matter. It's more so from the start. And what am I channeling with my graphics? What am I channeling with the subtitle to my event? Things like that.
Even if you disagree with the feedback, it's still helpful to get it. Okay, some people are going to misconstrue this, but I'm okay with that.
Somebody perceived this way.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's really cool. Maybe I should do live events so I can get more feedback.
Maybe.
What kind of live events have you been doing lately?
I just do a lot of teaching, sometimes with organizations and sometimes on my own. So sometimes I'll do just for funsies, podcast marketing panel discussion with a few friend colleague type people just to, let people in on what's working. And then maybe the people that I have on the panel have a very light sale for some sort of offering. But I usually try to make sure that is very implicit. And sometimes I'll do teaching for universities that are, working in media or in the podcast space. And a lot of times I just do a career chat, how did you get to where you are today? And that's when I get to tell them that I studied geography and I'm not doing anything with it, but I still love it.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. So let's see. Where am I going to take us next? we talked about, so yeah, we were talking about formatting and like at the top. So the way this episode will start is with a clip. I just like to, I feel like it's okay to disorient people for a minute.
Totally.
So
I'm with you on that completely.
and I usually like, if it's a good clip, it really does bring me into the show.
Like shock the listener into paying attention. And that's one way to do it.
Yeah. So I'll start with a cold 15-second-ish clip from the episode that I think is intriguing for someone listening. And then I'll usually record a special intro for my guests, like retroactively to recap what we discussed so that they can know what they're going to get out of the episode. I like the exercise of creating the scripted intro and having it because it forces whoever's creating the show, myself or my clients, to think through what they're offering, who they're offering it to, and how they're going to explain that.
Right.
So, you know, if you have a very niche show, that's fine. Just own it, you know, instead of being like, we're going to talk about everything and everyone should be interested. It's like,
No.
no. Let's dial it in here. Like, okay, you're a plumber and this is for plumbers.
Yes.
For people
this is
interested
for
in learning
my
about
fellow
plumbing.
plumbers. Love that. Yeah.
And I don't know who said this, but I learned this from someone like you who does a lot of teaching, or I was reminded, like, you need to make a promise to your audience through the show description and the intro, and then you need to keep that promise.
And then tell people that you kept that promise. Tell people what they're going to learn, teach them, and then tell them what you taught them.
How do you do that at the end of a podcast?
You can do it in a few ways. Like I said, you can spoon feed your listeners, but you can also do it a little bit more under the radar. One way is to have a section where you recap. Here are my takeaways. Another thing is to not say that so explicitly, but to share your recap anyway.
Is it okay if you do it at the top of the episode?
I mean, I actually do love also at the top of the show to be like, here's what I want you to listen for, because that allows me to have sort of a game to play with myself as I'm listening to it.
Okay. I like that. That's a way to orient it that I don't think I've ever done before.
Yeah, I think that's fun. And the only reason I think about these kinds of things is because I'm a great mimic. Like that is the only way that I've learned how to podcast, how to speak on stage, how to do anything public facing, is watching other people do it and either hating how they do it and doing the opposite, or loving how they do it and creating my own version of that. And I have definitely over time figured out that some of these things grip me and some do not. And the ones that grip me tend to be the ones that are telling me what I'm going to get and then delivering on that promise.
Do you want to talk about trailers?
Sure.
Are there any tips and tricks?
There are tons.
Anything you've learned as you've had your show about trailers that you could share with us, podcast producers?
Trailers are awesome. I love trailers. I at first really loved them as a consumer, just because it's a fun, quick way to learn about what I could listen to. And also, if I don't want to listen to absolutely everything that's on Apple Podcasts New and Noteworthy or being featured on Spotify's homepage, I can at least get a sense of it so that I can talk to other people about what they might like. So trailers are fun as a consumer, but also as a creator, they're great because they allow you to create an on-ramp, like we said, for your entire show, not just each episode like we've been discussing, but your trailer lives very prominently on your podcast page on Apple and on Spotify and on a lot of other podcast listening apps. And it's clearly marked as your trailer, which means that people are seeing it first and probably listening to it before listening to anything else and then deciding based on the trailer whether or not that show is for them. So again, it's a promise that you are either delivering on or not delivering on. And it's a funnel that gets smaller and smaller as people listen and drop off. And that's an opportunity for you to grab them and to give them a sense of the types of guests that you have on your show, or the type of, it's even like, what is our theme song? Like, let me play the theme song. Right, exactly. What sound effects am I using? Is this going to be slapstick? Is it going to be, more serious? Like, those are all things that should match between the trailer and the actual show. So I think trailers as a tool for onboarding are important, but also for marketing, because you can populate your RSS feed before your show is ready to go necessarily. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're working on a new show and you want to start marketing in early April, but your first episodes don't drop until late April, you can drop the trailer early and then start sending people to your Apple Podcast page to leave ratings and reviews or to start sharing the link.
Test the feed too and sort of make sure everything's connected to all the platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll launch an important meat and potatoes episode.
Yeah. What does it look like on the different listening apps? Is the thumbnail cute? Like all of that is stuff that you can do by populating the RSS feed before you're necessarily ready to drop 3 episodes.
So I have a couple ideas for how we could wrap up. I have some questions I had. I did like on the street interviews at On Air Fest. I could ask you a few of those questions.
I'd love that. Yeah. And I also love the way that you're explaining all of this. And I think you should keep it all in. You know, I think it's fun. And because we're talking so much about the craft of an interview, I think it's fun for you to leave in all of these like structuring, scaffolding questions.
And like thinking to myself.
I think it's great. Maybe in your intro, you say like, you know, usually I cut all this stuff out, but like, who knows? And they're going to even hear this now too. I think it's fun.
I think so too. I think you're right. Thank you. I think that's a really good idea. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
So some questions I wanted to interview you, but I didn't get a chance because you were so popular at On Air Fest. Everyone was like swarming you. So here are the questions I would have asked you, sort of rapid fire-ish.
Okay.
Famous host or unknown host? They're both really good at hosting.
Meaning like who do I prefer?
An unknown host you've never heard of before or a famous person that you might know and love.
Unknown.
Or just audio?
I prefer audio only. I rarely ever need the video component. I even find that when I'm sitting down to watch a YouTube video, my eyes can be elsewhere.
Interview style or narrative?
Depends on the topic, but I will go with narrative.
What was one big takeaway from On Air Fest this year for you?
Stairs are important. There were no stairs in the second building, and it was really, really hard to like shuffle a lot of people up and down this one elevator that there was. But other legitimate podcast-related takeaways, I would say there's a lot of excitement about the creator economy, and it's fun to see people who are not audio first creators now creating audio feeds.
I'm just curious, what was one of your favorite speakers or talks or presentations at On Air Fest this year?
Technically, I think the event was over, but this was part of On Air Fest. I went to a live taping of The Puzzler with AJ Jacobs, and Mo Rocca was there, who I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, and I just love him. I'm crying of laughter constantly when he's in the room, so any chance to hang out with him is great.
Oh, that's so sweet. Are you guys friends or are you just...
No, no, we are not friends. I am very much an admirer from afar. And actually, I've definitely said hi over the years. And I'm sure that if I was like, hi, Mo, I'm a huge fan. Like, I've tagged you in this over the years. I've gone to this, I've gone to that. I'm sure he'd be nice because he's a nice guy. But no, we're definitely not like friends.
Not pals yet. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I really enjoyed getting to know you better, Arielle. And you're really sweet for taking the time to do this with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to hear how this turns out and what you do end up cutting out. I think it'll be interesting, and maybe you keep the completely unedited version available for some people if they pay.
Thank you for listening to The Format. Head to substack.com, that's substack.com, to subscribe to The Format on Substack for our next monthly episode and blog about the future of podcasting. Stay real.